Good day, folks, and welcome back to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. And I'm sure many of you people have been waiting so long for my return and this new series, and I do apologize, of course. Not only did I have to prioritize getting my university work done and dusted, but I apparently got invited to participate in this 1050th Contest of Champions or something. I had to face some bloke called Chris Soulsword or something like that from my preliminary round. Round 1 itself has already begun back in March, and I expect round 2 to begin very soon, and I've been currently having to train and prepare for my inevitable match against some half-robot overlord or something. But, oh well, I've returned anyways, and hopefully things will get back on track again, though I still doubt it. But right now, let's talk about an album that I've always wanted to cover for some point ever since I started this show. And of course, it's from one of my favourite bands ever, Gorillaz. So far, I covered their eponymous album all the way back in my 13th episode, and Humans in my 17th. I do intend to tackle other albums that they did, like Demon Days, Plastic Beach, The Now Now, etc., at some various points in the future, but right now, I first want to look at something of theirs that's rather obscure. At least obscure by Gorillaz standards. One that kind of came out of nowhere and pretty much went back into nowhere. And I think it helps by offering a bit of background and context to this thing. During the North American leg of the Escape to Plastic Beach tour back in 2010, lead singer and co-creator Damon Albarn, or rather lead singer and keyboardist Stuart Pott, aka 2D, had created a string of short, experimental musical pieces as a sort of musical diary of the overall journey. And he had it all recorded, produced, and mixed on his iPad. I'm not even kidding with that one. I don't know what app he used exactly, perhaps something like Funkbox or GarageBand or something. But not only that, he did it all without any prior writing or preparing, and all of it within a month. Now, if something like that doesn't prove the mastery and skills of Damon Albarn, I don't know what will. However, it didn't get much promotion beyond maybe a music video on YouTube. It was even seemingly announced at the last minute a few days before it got released on 25th of December, just 9 months after Plastic Beach, for digital streaming on the Gorillaz website, possibly at least for those following the fan club at the time. Then it got a proper physical release on CD on the 19th of April the following year in 2011. Just over a year after Plastic Beach. And for a whole 6 to 7 years or so, many people thought that this could have very well been the last Gorillaz album. But would this go out on a bodacious bang or a wellowing whimper? Well, let's jump, or fall, into the Gorillaz album simply titled The Fall, and find out if it deserves a better chance or not. We begin the album with Phoner to Arizona. Recorded in the city of Montreal in Canada, in many cases, an album can only be good as its first track, and this is no exception. Immediately it kicks with this deep, buzzy bass and a snappy drum beat, soon followed by what sounds like a mellotronic sound, establishing this offish mood, like, as 2D himself puts it in Murdoch's private radio, a horror train journey descending into darkness, nighttime trouble and mayhem. And I can easily see that. I can imagine gazing out a train window or a bus window and looking at the vast landscapes passing by as flashes of recent memories appear within the blink of my eyes. And the visual music video on YouTube that came with it certainly fits that perfectly. Then we get this super distorted vocal that one probably wouldn't be able to decipher at first hearing or two, but only when you listen more closely to it might you be able to pick it up. This is a phoner to Arizona. You know what to do. We finally found a way forward, but it wasn't with you. This could likely allude to how the surviving remaining members of the Gorillaz cartoon band at the time, Murdoch, 2D, and Cyborg Noodle, were likely tagged and dragged along this long journey across the US, if not the rest of the world as well, but getting trapped within dressing rooms while the live band performed the songs in their place. And when they're not in the dressing rooms, the Gorilla cartoon band would usually just get blocked off by bouncers if that O2 advert is any indication. It's also technically the longest song on the album, and it's only at 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So you can imagine how moderately short a lot of the tracks here are going to be. But even that doesn't detriment the song or most of the others soon to follow. This one's a haunting yet groovy, stressed yet chilled, minimalistic yet feeling complex enough. It may even make one anxious and nervous. Unbearably so. At times, unbearably so. Next is Revolving Doors. Recorded in the city of Boston, Massachusetts, this is one of two songs to kind of be made a double single from this album. The other one we'll get to very soon. After the techno nightmare of Phoner to Arizona, we get a bit of levity in the form of a ukulele. Though even then, it does have a rather somber sound to it. It's not easy trying to make something like a ukulele sound serious and depressing, but 2D and Damon somehow found a way. And as you can imagine from the title, this is a song about automated sliding doors. Nah, just kidding. But he apparently began conception on this track after observing some revolving doors in a hotel during the ongoing tour. The moment of which reminded him of how dislocated, out of place, and far away from home he is. The constant revolving of said doors, seemingly going on and on for all eternity. The pointless rhythm and the endless repetitions. And when you have that all in mind when listening to this track, you can certainly feel that sense of the mundane and monotonous, and the feeling of being isolated even when in a crowded public place. Along with that melancholy ukulele, 2D sings some simple yet enigmatic lyrics, questioning what has he done and what will he become. In the bridge bits, he also mentions how he paid for a 7, but he got only an 8, and he paid up for 3, but got only 2. So, who is this he that 2D might be referring to? Murdoch? David Albarn? The Boogeyman? Someone else entirely? It's not exactly known. But of course, such bits are built up to the chorus itself, where the synths really kick in and drive home that fantastic sorrowful beat, while 2D sings about being paused by all the pills. It must be the painkillers getting to him. He goes on to give vague descriptions on his whereabouts, sitting in a diner while Beale's song plays. So he must be listening to Obla Di Obla Da. I'd be depressed if I had to hear that song, even as a big Beatles fan. Then we hear some low backing vocals, also by 2D himself, that you would eventually figure out and decipher. Revolving doors in London to a foggy day in Boston. Now, this could very likely be about how even far off distant cities, how far off they are from each other, and across a lake may seem so similar yet dissimilar at the same time. Familiar yet alien. So different and yet so alike. And already, it's all wearing down on our blue-haired, black-eyed fellow. And this solemn little tune captures that quite perfectly enough. I would listen to this song if ever I'm strolling aimlessly through the streets beneath a grey, cloudy sky, or just sitting in some restaurant or cafe while pondering. Revolving Doors is a song I would revolve back to every now and then. And like the track before it, this helps in settling down and establishing the general mood and feeling for what's to come for most of this album. And I guess even Damon must have given this song a chance as well, since during the Human Tour, just 6 to 7 years later, he and the Gorillaz would perform it once on the 12th of July 2017 at the Leader Bank Pavilion in Boston, fittingly enough. So, make that if you will. Continuing, we have Hillbilly Man, recorded in both Camden, New Jersey and Fairfax, Virginia. Similar to the previous song, this too starts with an acoustic guitar, presumably played by Mick Jones of the Clash fame, who also played on the title track of Plastic Beach and was even one of the major players for the Escape to Plastic Beach tour. Or maybe either by Damon or Cyborg Noodle, I don't know. It has a very chill and peaceful vibe, not necessarily bright and summery, but not completely somber either. Certainly has that old Western cowboy vibe, which definitely reflects the Americana theme of the album. We soon hear 2D's vocals again, just as laid back and melancholy as the music itself. Drive away, Anselm lonesome south. Like a real straight shooter, 3 lanes full. So I guess America suffers from traffic jams just as much as we do over here in Britain. That's one thing we have in common at least. However, just a minute in, as we hear 2D's voice echo off into the distance, the music turns a 180 as that authentic acoustic guitar gets completely sidelined by this punchy drum machine and trumpet sounding keyboards, very much like the Don Chromatic song, as if we've just woken up from a blissful dream and now thrusted back into a mundane yet frantic reality, which is probably how I'd imagine 2D, and by extent Damon, must have felt for a good chunk of the tour. I would compare the sudden shift of mood and style within a single piece of music to something like Empire Ants or even Soundcheck Gravity. Both songs I would rank as being among my favourite Gorillaz songs. Anyway, 2D continues to sing, albeit with a more oomph to his tone. Got a ride in my heart, get them going down. You don't have to be a start to get them going around. No, you have to be an end for that. For in the end, it doesn't even matter. Even if you try to move, wheel it to your right. So get on the driving wheel and save it for a round. So basically, go right to go left. Turn right to go left. Makes sense. Just make sure you don't end up falling into a pit of cacti. Then, of course, there's what I would consider the closest thing to a chorus the song has. A very filtered vocal of 2D's to sound more raspy and scratchy, as if with a very dry throat as a result of immense dehydration. At first hearing, one may not exactly understand right away what exactly he's singing, either helping me round, or more likely, more fittingly, hillbilly, hillbilly, hillbilly man. But either way is still equally valid in interpretation. One could be read as 2D feeling helpless and so much pressure at this point to the point of whatever energy he may have had left being utterly drained and begging in need of help, whether with handling the tour, his mental health, or probably both anyways. I mean, if you had to be involved in a car chase with Bruce Willis and a demented pickle of a bass player, get beat up senselessly by said bass player, watch a cyborg clone of a guitar player you thought to be dead cough out squid, have to reach out to Daly of all people, and have a case of cytophobia? you'd probably have a few mental scars too. So I digress. I do kind of like the song, mostly because of its self contrasting nature and its subversion of the idealization of traveling in America. The expectations set up by the welcoming acoustic guitar intro, then the reality hits you hard with those heavy synths and keyboards. Musically, it actually does remind me a bit of some of the songs from the Demon Days album, such as Oh Green World, White Light, and Fire Coming Out of the Monkey's Head. It's certainly one of the few tracks in this record that could stand out on its own just as easily. Then we get to Detroit with, well, Detroit, recorded in, well, Detroit, Michigan. Right away with that abrupt, roboticized voice yelling the very name itself, Detroit, the song would likely catch anyone listening off guard, whether you're listening on its own or the whole album in one go. Immediately following that is a very interesting music, to say the least. Something I would describe as Nintendo Wii music in purgatory with a dose of crack. And if that little description of mine isn't enough to sum up the song, I don't know what can. Across this short duration, the song seems to go on over and over in what seems like a loop with the occasional variation or addition. Then we get what sounds like a deep yet faint voice, likely saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Detroit over and over for a remainder of the track. While it may not be completely confirmed, it's implied that this was in fact Murdoch Nichols himself. So that possibly makes this the only contribution he even has in this album. I guess 2D had to give him something to do for this to count as technically a Gorillaz album and not just a 2D solo album or something. So he just gave Murdoch the microphone and just rambled something about Detroit. However, 2D would eventually make a solo album of his own a few years later, called Everyday Robots. To be honest though, in all honesty, I actually never been to Detroit, or really anywhere in the US outside of Florida for that matter. And that was like over a decade ago. So I don't know if this track represents the titular city well or not. To anyone watching this who may happen to be from Detroit or at least currently live there, feel free to comment your thoughts on this. Anyway, the song Detroit does seem a bit more like an interlude than a full-on standalone song, as some of the songs here will be an indication. It's not necessarily bad, mind you, since Gorillaz would technically make actual interludes for the Humans album, which I already talked about 2 years ago. It's also the shortest track on the album, at only 2 minutes and 3 seconds long. Well, technically second shortest track on the full album, but we'll be getting to that eventually. Things eventually ease down a bit with Chi-Town, one of 2 songs recorded in Chicago, Illinois. In fact, the title Chi-Town is often a slang term used to refer to Chicago itself, like the Windy City. Again, I've never been to Chicago, so anyone who lives there and happens to be watching this, do feel free to let me know as to whether the song does your place any kind of justice or not. That all said though, this is a breezy little tune, with its twinkling bass, audible synths and bass, what sounds like electronic wind playing every now and then, and a drum machine that's not fast nor slow either, just perfectly right in between. Near the beginning, we could hear the distinct voice of Damon, or possibly 2D, just dryly saying, Friday, Chicago. Certainly, again, driving home that whole music journal concept from this album. The lyrics in this song are very much as vague as they come on this album, but with that, they do leave a lot to the imagination, despite, or even rather because of it. The pine used to call, Lil' Rain didn't do it. Never got it back from you driveway. Turns out that the driver wanted to have the pie for himself, or herself, and even planned to kill 2D for it, but before she could go with that plan, she discovered that the pie had already been eaten by her dog. You can be a fool, remember? You can drive away, never go back there again. Yeah, I can imagine what the rent must be like there. There's red light in the moonlight, baby. That's all. I'm moving on from you. I guess whenever and if ever the moonlight, whether full or crescent, happens to turn red, anyone driving under it should just stop altogether to let people walk on by. Only when it turns green can they drive again. That's just a hard fact. You can try to leave me or doubt me. I'm the coolest still right now. So this is what 2D tried to convince himself and others after he attempted to snuggle inside a fridge. I never say goodbye, little baby, never again. But instead he'll either say adios, cheerio, or farewell. While the music itself can make one think of having a nice chilled time with Damon and the crew in the streets of Chicago, the lyrics themselves seem to speak about the continual feeling of distant separation from all you may know and recognize and gotten used to, be it your home or even your family, and worrying that they might doubt you or even move on from you. Also, this is the only other song from The Fall, aside from Revolving Doors, to actually be performed live. Once. 7 to 8 years later, during the Now Now tour on the 16th of October 2018 at the United Center Stadium in, fittingly enough, Chicago, of course. Makes me hope they would play more Fall songs live again. Though it would mean he would only play like Phoenix, Arizona in Montreal and Detroit in, well, Detroit. We then transition over to Little Pink Plastic Bags, the other song recorded in Chicago. Now this one is suddenly dripping, or rather flow in this case, with atmosphere. The synthesizers using this definitely sound like the musical interpretation of winds and blustery breezes. If wind itself could play a melody, this could very well be it. Adding on to that, we have that very machine-like drum and hi-hat beat, as well as 2D singing this line over and over. They're just little pink plastic bags blowing on a highway alone. They don't know where they'll go, they're just gonna float out. So, in other words, you know that scene in American Beauty where Wes Bentley shows Thora Birch that video he took of a plastic bag just blowing about? This could be like an alternate soundtrack to that. Just put it that way. While it does seem to connect to the whole plastic motif of, well, Plastic Beach and our carelessness for the environment and all that, 2D could also be talking about how such plastic bags, almost as if they were like people in a way. People who wander about alone, not having any idea of where they'd be going to or planning on where they even want to go to. They just let the wind take them where they may bother to go. I can picture sitting with 2D and the crew on a tour bus or car as we're driving towards or leaving Chicago, looking out the window and expecting to see maybe a palm tree or two, but only glimpsing a plastic bag drifting and floating about outside in the motorway under some dark grey clouds. Sometimes it's the simplest and vaguest of lyrics that can be open to the most interpretations. And this song alone is perfect enough demonstration of that. Or it could just be some trash blowing in the wind. Do we even know how complicated our circulatory systems are? The mood then shifts and transitions once more into the Joplin Spider. Once again, this plays up the music journal factor this time. Here we hear what sounds like actual talking between Damon and one of his security guards, albeit in a very low quality, like this was recorded with a phone or something, which wouldn't surprise me, honestly. This is contrasted by the very clear quality of the low, suspenseful synths playing underneath it. Fittingly so, as the two are talking about a spider of sorts that they just spotted and discovered, believing that it might be poisonous. Then, about 30 seconds in, just as the dialogue finishes, just like Hillbilly Man, we're suddenly taken back with surprise by this loud, buzzing, bassy synth, joined by some clanging percussion beats and what sound like laser blasts. It almost feels like a hallucinogenic high from spider venom. The lyrics themselves all have a bit of that surreal vibe, while still clearly referencing this particular spider. Colourful sailors washed up on the shore, caught upon bad times and met upon violence. Likely referring to the live band members themselves arriving to the US and immediately facing hardships and complications across this ambitious tour. And of course, them being sailors pretty much goes back to the whole nautical motif and imagery of Plastic Beach. Spider in the ditch, she saw it all, went to train, right to dance, and world is falling on bad times. So basically, with this whole recession going on, the rent on the ditch was getting pretty bad that the spider decided to cross country. And at some point, it might have bitten Peter Parker and Cindy Moon and became a massive mutant spider and then a goddess, apparently, I think. Superhero comics can be weird. During the ending instrumental section of the song, as everything begins to get a bit chaotic yet still restrained, almost like Every Planet We Reach is Dead from the Demon Days album, at some point, you can even hear what might be the Skype startup sound of all things about like once or twice. At least if you have keen enough ears and you know exactly what you're looking for or listening for in this case, especially when it's tucked in and buried deep in the soundscape sandwich. I don't know if this is meant to be part of the track or was just incidentally caught during recording, but little details like that do add to the overall mix, concept, and themes. Like I said, Damon, or 2D, recorded and mixed all this with his iPad, all on the go. So it's likely he might have used Skype on said iPad to, well, keep up to date and in touch with other people, be they fellow musicians or even close friends and families back home.